We've talked on the YouTube channel in the past, guys, about Lost Planet, this being a franchise that I've always kind of stated as a kid-friendly Gears of War franchise, and unfortunately, up to this point, we've only gotten 3 Lost Planet games, and you could say that this was just a trilogy that was meant to be, or you can actually look at what might have happened here that we wouldn't or didn't at this point have gotten more of these games in the franchise. So what we're going to talk about in this first segment of the show is what happened to Lost Planet. So let's get into it. So guys, one thing that I think is important to mention here is when you look at the past of any franchise, there's usually a couple of reasons as to why that series continued or why it stopped, that being like the developers and publishers stopped making these games at the end of the day. And I think it can be attributed pretty much to the most recent game, that being Lost Planet 3, guys. This is a game that released in 2013, so we're going on 7 years ago at this point, guys. And so lots of questions here. You know, why haven't we seen a continuation of the Lost Planet franchise, a franchise that I really enjoyed? Lost Planet 3, in my opinion, was kind of not as good, obviously, as the first 2 games, but it was still in the Lost Planet, franchise, and so I would just have loved to see a continuation moving forward, even if it would have taken a totally, new storyline and things of that nature. But like I said, guys, typically speaking, it comes down to a couple of reasons. And number one, guys, being the reception. Now, a lot of times publishers and developers, they look at the reception and they'll take that with a pinch of salt, especially if their sales are good. But if both of those things, that being the critical reception as well as the sales, are poor, then they may think twice about making a continuation of that particular franchise. So the reception, guys, of Lost Planet 3, the most recent of the Lost Planet games, received mixed reviews on all platforms, according to the review aggregation website Metacritic. In Japan, Famitsu gave the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 versions a score of 19, 18, 17, and 19 for a total of 33 out of 40, which isn't terrible. The Escapist gave the Xbox 360 version 3 stars out of 5 and called it a solid third-person shooter that is marred by some repetitive gameplay elements and a lack of depth with its mechanics and story. However, the Digital Fix gave the PS3 version a score of 4 out of 10 and stated, 2 positive things to take away from everything is that it is arguably the best game Spark have ever produced and is not as bad as Aliens Colonial Marines. Digital Spy gave it a similar score of 2 stars out of 5 and said it was not a lost cause. There's some genuine emotion to be found in its storyline and a spattering of variety to its combat, but this is marred by unoriginal core gameplay and lackluster level design. And so that's kind of the first thing, guys. I mean, you look at pretty much the reception all the way through here. I mean, in all reality, guys, it wasn't horrible. It was mixed reviews, right? We're talking, it was average and mixed at best. And so, I mean, you look at like IGN, basically got 6.2 out of 10, which isn't terrible. It was okay. But okay a lot of times doesn't justify a continuation of any particular franchise. Lost Planet 3 sold 27,503 PlayStation 3 copies on the first week of being on sale in Japan, the lowest sales debut out of the numbered installments of the series. Reporting on its fiscal year, Capcom described the game's sales as below expectations due in part to intensifying competition in the European and US markets. So that's kind of number 2, guys. You have mixed reviews on top of pretty lackluster, below expectation, sales. That is going to spell disaster for really any franchise out there. No matter how special you think a franchise is, sometimes one or many things can kind of turn this into a poor direction. Now, when they're talking about intensifying competition, we all know, guys, the shooter genre as a whole around this time was ending up starting to kind of just continue to build. I mean, the shooter genre was really growing at a rapid clip, and I gotta say, guys, that I think that can certainly, you can kind of put some of the blame on the competition, But more so than that, in my opinion, guys, was actually the things that were right in front of Capcom's face here, that being like the repetitive gameplay elements, which is very true. Lack of depth, as far as the story and such, the mechanics. And I thought that the marketing was really poor for Lost Planet 3. Lost Planet 1 and 2 I thought was great as far as the marketing was, but I don't remember much marketing at all when it came to Lost Planet 3. And so what I'm getting at is, I think that it was kind of set up for disaster from the very beginning because of the poor, simply because of, the poor, marketing that was put into place for this game. And then on top of that, of course, ends up having bad reviews or mixed, I should say, reviews. And then, of course, it just didn't sell as well as the other two. And then Capcom's probably working on their other bigger titles, obviously, out there. That being, of course, Devil May Cry and Resident Evil. And so you got to think to yourself, would this game ever come back in the future? Well, guys, I don't think that all is lost as of quite yet. I think that there's a number of reasons why we should have, be optimistic. Number one is that you look at the reviews. Sure, they're not great, but they're not terrible either. And so what I'm saying is that I believe that when it comes to these franchises that don't have great critical reception and even you have lower than expected numbers as far as, from a sales perspective, that doesn't mean that it didn't sell well. It just means that it didn't sell as highly as, the publisher thought it was going to. So what I'm getting at is that they still made money at the end of the day, but it might just not have been as much money as Capcom was expecting. So what I'm getting at here is, if a lot of times when it comes to these types of franchises, it really comes down to the fan bases. The fan base has to be the ones that really voice their opinion on having a continuation of one of these franchises or beloved franchises. If some of you really enjoy Lost Planet as a franchise, as I did as well, we have to voice our opinion, stating that we want a continuation of this franchise moving forward. And I think there's a lot to be gained from a Lost Planet 4 moving into the next generation of consoles especially. But obviously, we got to keep our fingers crossed, and we have to be the ones voicing our opinion. You have to build a movement around this game if you really want to get it made. But let me know, guys, in the comment section below, do you guys want to see another Lost Planet game, or do you think they should just stick with the trilogy and leave it as is? Let me know what you guys think, and for more Lost Planet 4 content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.